And why are dumpster fires a thing, like, at all? Like, that's apparently a recreational sport for some, so we should probably talk about it in recreation management. All right, so we've been talking a little bit about different classes of resources with respect to forest recreation management, the dynamics of human impact, and how we screw up as well-meaning visitors, for the most part, those resources in our parks. And currently we're talking about the human layer of resources. So on Monday we talked about cultural, historic, prehistoric artifacts, and wrapped up the conversation talking about infrastructure and facility and the built and designed environment of parks. Trash cans are absolutely a part of that infrastructure side of things. So World War II happens, and all of the World War II doughboy freshies come home, they start making babies, and we get the baby boomer generation. So your mostly grandparents at this point, I think, would be baby boomers. That was a huge population jump for the United States at a time of economic prosperity jump based on the military-industrial sort of complex shifting back towards domestic production, as well as making a whole bunch of nukes to keep those darn Russians in line. So, all of a sudden, we have this huge groundswell of use at parks and so forth. Like, when you look at the graph of total use at parks and forests and wildlife refuges and all these things getting created at the same time, over time, it's super low in the 1920s. We didn't even have highways to most of these places. Most of the parks aren't even parks yet. In the 30s, we got the Great Depression. We have people living in national parks full time and fishing out of places like the Merced River because they were starving otherwise. Subsistence, existence, right out of our resources. Places like the Shawnee were Dust Bowl farms, then they became the Shawnee National Forest, etc. in the 30s and into the 40s and stuff like that while we're fighting World War II. Well, after World War II, a lot of that stuff is kind of behind us. And we get the Eisenhower interstate system getting built to connect the entire United States. Urban development shifts away from walkable places to drivable places based on a heck of a lot of money spent by automotive manufacturing companies to get folks off of trains and into their shiny new cars. So part of the American dream is having the big sort of cast iron Cadillac or like Lincoln Continental or Grand Marquis or whatever, like the huge land yacht. Feels like you're driving a overstuffed couch on the road, kind of a driving experience. And a lot of people took their young families with these little baby boomer kids to parks on family vacations. They were cheap back then, they're cheap now. So we get this huge explosion of use, and as a result of that, the infrastructure in these parks, which is pretty much still all the first generation stuff built by hand out of available local materials, in 1916 and beyond, it completely starts, there's wheels coming off in terms of visitor centers overcrowding, septic leach fields getting just completely overblown, which is unpleasant. The lodges struggling to bring in enough food for their high-end guests staying at these really like world-class, hand-built, don't make them anymore out of like native redwood planks and stuff like that. And so there's this service ethic of, okay, I'm a park ranger with a park service, the preeminent park management organization in the world, and we're getting slammed. We're going to up our game, and for all of the demand for these things, we're going to meet that. We're going to put in, kind of boils down to, a lot more trails. We're going to build the next generation of visitor centers for the 50-year anniversary of the U.S. National Park Service. We're going to kick off a 10-year construction effort in 1956 called Mission 66. And we're going to get a whole bunch of, well, it was the 50s and 60s, so a bunch of poured concrete structures like Fanner Hall as like the next generation of visitor centers. Any of you guys ever been to Smoky Mountains National Park? You've been up on Klingman's Dome? What is at the top of Klingman's Dome?
Outlet, kind of like, there's a place you can look out.
Yeah, it's not.
I've been there like
It's not just an outlook you can look out. It's a tower you can go up and look out. Like you're not high enough on the tallest mountain in the Appalachians, anywhere south of Canada and north of Brazil. It's fine. We're gonna build a tower on top so that you can see it. It's just, as the Zoomers would say, a little extra. You decide if it's in the good extra way or the bad extra way. Anyway, so there was this, let's build it all, let's pave a bunch of roads. We get stuff like Skyline Drive really sort of expanded and landscaped very aggressively at Shenandoah. Jack was out the other weekend, and so forth. And with that comes a lot of garbage cans. And with a lot of garbage cans come the in-house trash dumps, the landfills, kind of behind each one of these lodges. And so between 1916 and kind of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I mean, some of this stuff was going on pretty late until the wildlife ecologists and the recreation ecologists got together and said, we can't have 100+ bears behind each lodge at Yosemite or at Yellowstone, for example, every single night with bleachers built around them so people can watch bears eat trash. Like, this is a disaster. This is not natural. It's not beautiful or noble. This doesn't speak to America's wild character. This is like low-grade tourism. And we also produce a lot of trash. So the solution becomes not a service ethic of we are the National Park Service and we will service all of these trash cans constantly and fill up our landfill on site and burn a bunch of air pollution with nasty diesel engines trucking it off site. We're going to shift to what's called a responsibility ethic with this infrastructure resource and others like it. And we're going to get slogans like, complete the saying, pack it in, pack it out. Leave no trace. For those of you who are motor vehicle enthusiasts, like ATVs, OHVs, UHVs, off-road motorcycles, dirt bikes, it's quite a list. Those weird convertible, like hovercraft ATVs that go out over the water and then you fly off. You may be familiar with tread lightly. Like, you can't not leave a tire tread with a vehicle on most kinds of soil, but at least don't come back through and tear the street up like Ice Cube once rapped on the Blade 1 soundtrack. Okay? So, we shift from a service ethic to a responsibility ethic, and that does a couple of things. It changes how people come to our parks expecting to be coddled in a lodge versus needing to do a little bit of math. Maybe if you want to go backpacking, instead of kind of the European approach of let's hike or backpack from lodge to lodge, and we'll space out those lodges around the mountain like Mont Blanc, which is a very popular European mountain circumnavigation. It's like a loop trail that goes around, and there's a bunch of lodges that connect the dots, and they're each several miles apart from each other up at altitude. So you gotta carry your bad weather gear for up on the mountain. You're up in the Alps. But you go to a lodge for breakfast, or you start at the lodge for breakfast. You know, you roll out of your tent, roll up your sleeping bag, or roll out of the lodge bunk, roll up your sleeping bag, tuck it in your pack, have a nice breakfast of, I don't know what European people eat, foie gras and sadness, whatever. Then you hike a couple hours to the next lodge or cabin, which is a couple of miles away. So you get there about lunchtime. You have some wine and cheese, maybe a little bread, backpacked up the mountain or helicoptered up the mountain for you. And then you hike that evening to where you have a nice dinner. And that's a very service-oriented approach. It's also super nice. Like, if you've ever been backpacking and had to carry all your own food and water, water's heavy. Food is super heavy and bulky. And it makes you smell like food to wildlife that's hungry. So why not just go to a civilized place where they've hunted out all that stuff eons ago, and you just hike towards wine and cheese like it's a nice trip. But the American National Park Service decided on a responsibility ethic instead, because we're dealing with recreationists in the millions instead of the credit card hikers, for the most part, who are credit card camping, as it's called, or glamping, or basically self-moving tourism, right? It's just one step off from hopping on a tour bus and going on a wine trail. It just happens to be up on the side of a mountain in cabins and lodges. So, these days, we have a couple of trash cans and dumpsters near visitor centers and large developed campgrounds and so forth that are close to roads, because we can service those with the National Park Service's largely electric vehicle fleet now. But we don't have them most other places. They pulled out lots of trash cans at trailheads, for example, because the research showed that when that thing gets full, what do people do? They throw their trash at it instead of in it and keep on going, right? Because, God forbid, you have to carry a wrapper like another 100 yards to your car. Like, that sounds like work after being on a trail and having a good time. So this is gonna kind of shape our discussion today on infrastructure resources. We're gonna talk about your park and the infrastructure that they got, the trail networks, the trailheads, the built environment, the signs along those trails, the visitor centers, the lodges, roads connecting everything, buried electric cables instead of cables up on poles, because this is wildlands and storms happen, and building roads is already super expensive and hard, and clearing territory is super expensive and hard. So let's bury as much of that stuff as we have to have well out of sight, and it'll be super durable and a little bit more energy efficient that way because it's cooled by the earth and so forth, lower resistance on those electric lines. Okay, so think about your park. Our assignment for this past Monday was look up the map of your park and look at how many miles of trails do you got? Do you have a bunch of boat ramps? Do you have, well, those are mostly more Forest Service run areas that have like motorized ski lifts and stuff like that on ski runs run by concessions operators under contract with the Forest Service in some of the more mountainous places. On summer camp, we drove by, passing along Wolf Creek Pass, some really cool looking ski slopes, and they're all on, I guess it's the Rio Grande National Forest right there. I mean, beautiful, beautiful spots. We don't really have that in the Park Service because parks are not a service ethic kind of a place. We're not going to clear a bunch of lines up and down mountains to put in motorized ski lifts. We're going to have you sign up for a backcountry skiing permit at the backcountry office in the front country area by the visitor center and the admin complex. And we're going to send you out there on your own, and you got your own telemark skis and so forth. And if you want to go up a mountain on skis, you better have the right kind of skis, otherwise you're going to be sliding back a lot. Okay? So, what kind of infrastructure did you guys find at your parks Monday and Tuesday and earlier today? What kind of built environment? It's generally going to be the fewest segments of road, so we have more space and budget and availability for more miles of trails. We're going to have to make some hard trade-offs on the size of the parking lots serving those trailheads and connecting us to the road system, which we're trying to keep as small as possible. So what's it like at your park? Lots of miles of trails, a few miles of roads? Is it the other way around? Is it mostly a driving park? We have some of those.
One of the things I found interesting was, like, at Olympic National Park, at least, like, more of the more popular trailheads have larger parking lots, while, like, some of the least popular are a bit smaller than, like, the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty cool. Didn't really think about, like, the more popular, the bigger the lot, compared to those that are least popular have smaller lots.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So for the recording, we have bigger lots at busy high-demand trails, much smaller parking lots, sometimes just gravel wide spaces next to the road for some of the smaller trailheads. Okay, that makes sense. Any of you guys and gals who went on summer camp, we'll get back to the parks we've chosen for this semester, but any of you guys and gals who went on summer camp, do you remember our brief time at Rocky Mountain National Park? Any of the trailheads and or parking lots we passed. Not in the burned section, that doesn't count. Like half the park got torched the other year, super recently. But do you remember anything about the trailheads and parking lots inside Rocky Mountain National Park in our brief tour through there? So there's a couple of trailheads in the Bear Lake Road corridor there. And one of them is a super big lot. Like, huge. And it's also served by a shuttle bus network run by the National Park Service, which is a little bit unusual for the National Park Service. But the demand is so high at the Bear Lake Road Trails area for Bear Lake, Nymph Lake, Lake Hayaha, Bearstadt Lake. Like, there's a bunch of beautiful, beautiful lakes there. And the hikes to get to them are not super, super long or hard, so the demand is high. And there's a bunch of trailheads. There's 5 or 6 of them along the Bear Lake Road that terminates at the Bear Lake parking lot, the huge one. And some of the others are this big. So the responsibility ethic that the Park Service has adopted at Rocky Mountain National Park and at a bunch of other places, including your park most likely, is to try and focus everybody into one or a couple of big parking lots to get you away from your car for as long as they can. And that's hard. Claw Americans away from their Dodge Rams and their trucks with and without bow ties and lift kits and snorkels and like the occasional Sawzalled Bronco with like the back half of the roof removed and stuff like that. And Jeeps, lots and lots of Jeeps. So many Jeeps and Subarus. Anyway, so they dump you into these big lots. There are huge lots at places like the Grand Canyon, like Disney scale lots. And then they have shuttle buses to get you between places so that we can have a couple of buses on the road and not 50 million cars that are all going to stop every time they see a bunch of wildlife right at the side of the road and block everybody behind them, and people are honking and everybody's breathing everybody else's exhaust. And it's like how you get the respiratory version of pink eye. It's bad. Like, you don't want everybody in their car in your park. Just everything sort of grinds to a congested halt. It's not so good. So we get people out of their cars, and we do provide the service of the shuttle buses, but it's in order to get a net shift of responsibility onto people out onto trailheads instead of from parking lot to parking lot. Does that make sense? Cool. A lot of work goes into this. Part of my PhD was a multi-million-dollar project at Rocky Mountain National Park to help kind of design the deployment of the shuttle bus system so that it's chef's kiss perfect. It's a complex, ever-changing level of demand on a moment-to-moment basis in a park. So you want to have those buses tightly tuned to what people actually want to do. Otherwise, they're going to be in their cars. They're going to be real unhappy. So, back to you guys and gals. What does your park have in terms of infrastructure that helps shift folks from a service ethic of showing up at the lodge and having steaks every night and not really getting out into the park? What kind of infrastructure do they have to get folks out, to carry their own trash out, to be a little bit more self-reliant and self-serving in a good way?
Ours is the main visitor center, actually where the main ferry terminal is, so like cruise ship kind of is like, there are little nice trails near there and some beaches in this little inlet, and that seems like probably where they keep people. And then as you go along, you've got one major inland road, one major coastal road, but they spread out camping, a few restaurants, but basically in the bay
Okay, so you said a key detail there. There's a ferry terminal, because this is an island park, right? And most folks are going to access the park from the ferry or other nearby ships at anchor, and then they're going to hit the visitor center first, and then they kind of got to go past the visitor center to access anything else. Is that true for any of the other parks here? Jack is nodding. Jack, which is your park? Royal. Yeah, you got to go through the visitor center at Houghton, Michigan, over to the visitor center, it's real tiny, on the island, to access the rest of the island. The Park Service runs that entire show, one end of the island to the other. Okay? Anybody else? Visitor center located near an entrance such that you kind of have to hit up the visitor center. And most folks want to anyway, right? So it's a good bathroom stop. You get the sticker for your Nalgene. You get the medallion for your hiking pole, the patch for your backpack, the selfie out in front of the sign. There's this whole list of things that a lot of folks tend to do outside of your visitor center. So if you're not sure, pull up the map of your park on your phone. Take a look. Where is the visitor center located relative to the entrance? Anybody ever been to Yosemite National Park? There's a tiny little town at the entrance. We call it a gateway community. At the sort of the mouth of Yosemite National Park. Anybody know what that's called? Do you remember? El Portal, which is Spanish for the portal. You gotta go through El Portal to get into the business of the valley area, the high use area of Yosemite National Park. Okay? What that does is it keeps the miles of road down. If you don't have a bunch of different ways to get into the park, you don't have roads carving up your habitat, fracturing your habitat into smaller, less functional, less healthy chunks. Okay? There's less road travel on fewer miles of road that's constrained to main arteries, and you can manage that a little bit better. All right? Cool. Take a look also at the trail networks. Remember, that's another part of our built environment. Are the trails kind of set up the same way as the roads, but maybe at a different scale? Because the travel speed is much different for most trails. We have a lot of trails spurring out from relatively few trailheads, or is it pretty much all one trail, one trailhead? Take a look at your trails map for your park on your phone. This is a pretty important detail. So if we have one trail, one trailhead, that cranks up the number of parking lots that we gotta clear, develop, maintain, or pave to the tune of $10,000 per space in initial cost, plus maintenance, as a basic rule of thumb. So if we have a bunch of trails spurring from a smaller number of parking lots and trailheads, then we're being a little bit more cost efficient. We're getting lots of people out with less infrastructure to maintain, if that makes sense. We're getting folks out onto the trails where it's a good thing. They're encountering the beauty of our park and our nature and our resources, and not having to fight with a bunch of parking lots taking up a bunch of that landmass. Okay? Take a look at the spatial configuration, the arrangement across the surface of your park for trails connecting to trailheads. So a naive implementation would be to have, for an absurd example, let's say 10 trails radiating out from each of your trailheads, and each go out somewhere interesting and then come back. And you have to hike each section of trail twice to hike each trail, out and back. So where we have the opportunity, you're gonna see, instead of those lollipop loop out and back type trails, we're gonna have a whole bunch of short trails that maybe connect two trailheads. And then a trail that goes out a little bit further past that, connecting to that short trail, connecting the two trailheads. And then a further one that loops out farther, maybe farther up the valley at Rocky Mountain National Park, or way up the valley at Yosemite National Park, or wherever your park is. And then from there, you might have some trails going off of that back loop that connect to some other watershed on the other side of your mountain system in the Olympics, a longer distance trail. Okay? So we've mentioned this briefly before. This is called a stacked loop trail system. And you as the hiker, with one or two trailheads, you have dozens of different itineraries or routes. So an ordered list of turns you're going to take at the different trail junctions is an itinerary. Cool. Take a look at what your trails are near next. So this is going to be an interface between your water and topography and soils resources and vegetation to a lesser extent. Interfacing with your recreation facilities resources, your trails. At Acadia National Park, there are trails that run up pretty every ridge and mountain and then go down the backside. There are also trails that run around pretty much every pond or lake at Acadia National Park right along the shoreline. Now, we were just talking at the beginning of the semester about how we don't want to run trails in flat, hard-to-drain places. So it's a little weird that a place like Acadia National Park, one of the crown jewels of the park system, one of the busiest parks in the world, over 2 million visitors a year, because it's close to New York City and Boston and all those places. It's weird that that expert set of trail crews would run a bunch of trails right next to their low-lying water bodies, their lakes, their ponds. Gorgeous, gorgeous lakes and ponds. It makes sense from a visitor's perspective, but from your job perspective, it's a heck of a lot of work to maintain a trail in soft shoreline habitat. It's going to be real hard on your wildlife species and your vegetation species and your soil resources and your clear water resources. So why would they do that? There's a lot of interaction effects that could be negative. But where are your trails in relation to water bodies and topographic features like ridge lines that people normally want to hike for beautiful views and knife edge ridges and those goofy Insta edits where you are standing on a knife edge ridge and it's super windy as always, so you throw an empty pop bottle down and it goes up and you catch it again and then it blows out of your hand and you're like, oh, well, I guess I just littered. Let's go back to the lodge where I can edit my edit and upload it. It'll be sick. I'll be full of clout. So take a look at your trails, spatial arrangement next to resources. Anybody have trails that run next to stationary bodies of water, ponds and lakes? I see some yeses. Okay. What is your park for everybody? C&O Canal National Historic Park. Okay. And canals at that time had canal towpaths. So that's one really long path or trail literally right next to the C&O Canal. It's partially designed by George Washington. Pretty sweet. There are also a bunch of other trails from the nearby communities like Potomac for people fishing and walking their dogs. There are more rugged trails like the Billy Goat Section A Trail, which floods and people occasionally die on, and so forth. Spitsbergen Cliffs, jumping into the Potomac River because sometimes you... I'm not going to make a joke. That's inappropriate. All right. So for these trails that run next to stationary bodies of water, and a canal, although it's technically flowing water, is going to be mostly close enough to stationary. We call it flat water, and it's pretty still. We're going to have to do a couple of things with our facilities. Understanding that the demand to be near stationary bodies of water for fishing, for that aesthetic or lifeway, for hiking along the Billy Goat Section A Trail on those cliffs, and so forth, the demand is just always going to be there. Jenny Lake at Grand Teton National Park has lots of trails and campsites like abutting it because it's super gorgeous and popular, and it's a reflecting body of water for the Tetons. You get all the same photos from everybody who goes. So we're going to have to manage that intensive demand intensively. So your trail resources, your built environment in those places, and closer to mountain ridges where it's real exposed, tends to be real steep, we're going to have to build it up. At Acadia National Park, for the hiking path that goes around Jordan Pond, the entire thing, it's miles long. The entire thing is boardwalked about 3 feet off the ground with puncheon bridging. So it's not milled dimensional lumber. It's logs they got on site, chop them into 8 or 16 foot lengths, chop off some extra sections, make footings and pylons for the bridges to raise it up physically raise the stringers or the decks of the bridge off of that soft, easily punctured soil surface, saturated soils, right at the water's edge. And you can have that hike and be just inches from that extremely sensitive, fragile amphibian, reptile habitat, fish breeding habitat, and those shore grasses and so forth, and having a great time and zero damage to it. What's the management trade-off with a boardwalk trail that's miles long, that's hand-built on site from gathered materials and lots of sweat equity? We can't just go to Lowe's and buy 50,000 board feet of lumber and build this boardwalk. It's on site using local species and it kind of blends into the landscape very well. What's our trade-off there? Like, what do you have to do to get a nice boardwalk trail that's a couple, 3 miles long? What's that?
Pay a lot of money.
A lot of money, yeah, exactly. So you gotta spend your trail crew's time and effort and stuff, human capital, on that instead of all the other trails while they're working on that. And you're gonna have to do it again once those hopefully rot-resistant wood species that you've selected start to go the way of all things, and senesce and start to break down. Okay? So does your park, maybe C&O Canal National Historic Park is an automatic yes for this one, do you have to put a lot of your capital, your available resources into providing and maintaining paths, infrastructure, built facilities near water? Anybody else other than C&O Canal National Historic Park? That's like most of the show for these guys. A bunch of archaeological built features as well, like the locks and dams there. Anybody else?
We're next to the ocean, so like you said on Monday, any kind of like metal structure, got saltwater spray, or any kind of like trails built like that, they have to keep rebuilding and rebuilding.
It's a good thing we wouldn't have to use any like metal nails or fasteners on all of that. Oh God, we're in trouble. Okay? So boardwalks at beaches, especially in tropical areas, in the Caribbean and in places like Hawaii, they've switched to that sort of recycled soda pop bottle plus, so I believe that kind of plastic is polyethylene terephthalate, PETE. It's like milk jug plastic. You combine that with a bunch of sawdust and resin, some UV stabilizer so it doesn't break down, and you got a bunch of plastic molded in the shape of wood, like with fake wood grain in it. I mean, it's impressive. And then basically anodized, so rust-resistant metal fasteners building up the trail surfaces in those places, because it's never not going to be tropical. The soil erosion processes present in tropical areas are exponentially more aggressive at higher temperature and what can be higher acidity in some places than in like the Midwest here. You're never not going to have to deal with that corrosion, that chemical etching of everything that you emplace. So yeah, we got some work to do to figure out not only what recreation infrastructure, what features we want to design and build and maintain and chain ourselves to as park rangers. We want to work real hard on figuring out, okay, so do we need to wrap a trail around like every lake? Or does the really nicely restored and accessible towpath have to like stretch the whole distance? Or can we like, we wouldn't tear out the old towpath. It's protected as an archaeological feature, but we don't have to maintain it all. We could just let some of it go back to forest. And that is the answer. Anybody ever been, you may have heard of this place, Touch of Nature. It is not a national park, but it does have a bunch of archaeologically significant trails and stonework and stairs and stuff like that. Some backcountry facilities built by, anybody know who? Who built these? Way back in the day in the 30s? Flapjack-powered, good old American stick-to-itiveness, the Civilian Conservation Corps. There's a bunch of archaeologically significant trails at Touch of Nature. And a bunch of other state parks, right? The Lodge at Giant City, built by the CCC, or the WP, I can't remember which. Anyway, those are recreation facilities as well as archaeological resources. So in some cases, a valid answer for you for some of our exercises this semester can be to say, this is an archaeological feature. It's part of our recreation facilities. It's part of the C&O Canal National Historic Path, or the Civilian Conservation Corps built the very first arboretum in the United States was built by the CCC out west in one of our national parks. It's okay for you to say, we're gonna let nature and time do their thing for this. That's allowed. You don't have to like restore and excavate everything. You just need to know that it's there and make a well-informed decision on, we're gonna sort of free this burial site from the matrix of soil and so forth that's around it, remove the overburden, do a bunch of archaeology and stuff like that, preserve it, open it up to people. Or we're going to do all that archaeology and excavation and restoration and preservation, but not open it up to the public. That's a valid answer, if that's the most protective thing for those irreplaceable, priceless resources. And you can do the restoration, open it up to the public, curate it, and so forth. Or you can close it all down and just let it grow over. And that was part of the answer for parts of the trail network at Touch of Nature. At Acadia National Park, there's some beautiful, just exquisite, amazing rock work done around the year 1900 and earlier by local residents, and then later by the Rockefeller family, that Rockefeller family, in terms of opening up that whole island for walking up any of those mountains and stuff like that. And unless you're one of the like trail-focused rangers there, you may never see any of it. It's like off in the forest on that island, and it's gorgeous. It's amazing stuff. I mean, it's like Indiana Jones tier. Like, wow, look at this thing I found all covered in vines and stuff like that. But it's just grown over. It's shut down and allowed to go back to nature. That's a valid option for you guys and gals. Okay, so later this semester, we're going to be running through a bunch of tricky scenarios for each of these parks with a bunch of gotchas attached to them, because life is complex, and being a professional forester working in park management is an interesting and meaningful set of challenges. These are some of your valid responses. We're going to open it up and provide access. We're going to catalog it and not provide access. We're going to let it go back to nature. We're going to do something else. Okay? So, file those away. Make a note of that. Next, on infrastructure, we've got things like, what's the demand at your park for well-curated lodge or hotel style residents versus folks who are there to get away from hotels. Okay? In the front country, like visitor center and lodges and cafeterias and post offices and laundromats complex at most of the major national parks, you can get a pretty quick sense of this by comparing the number of lodge beds versus the number of campsites that are available in the backcountry. And that number is going to be different for every park. Some of these national parks, believe it or not, even some of the biggest and busiest ones, don't have any backcountry camping, period, full stop. There's no way for you to do it as a visitor. In other parks, they don't have any lodges. They might have some motels in the gateway community like El Portal. El Portal's pretty tiny. But if you've ever been to Gatlinburg, they've been known to have a few hotels. Or when we drove through Estes Park on summer camp, we saw a few hotels. A couple of famous hotels. So, what does your park have in terms of lodging, residence, and shelter? Your park may or may not have shelters along its longer trails. So if you pick the Lewis and Clark Trail, is that a lot like the Appalachian National Scenic Trail? Lewis and Clark Trail is a historic trail, so different missions slightly for those two. Is it like the Appalachian Trail and it's got something like 200 shelters built along the way? Or does it have few, if any, shelters? That's a non-trivial thing. The Appalachian National Scenic Trail, last time I checked, had, I believe it was 2 law enforcement rangers responsible for the entire thing. The Appalachian National Scenic Trail, or Appalachian National Scenic Trail, as they say in the South, is over 2,000 miles long. Each of those law enforcement rangers is pretty busy. So, the idea that a lot of use is going to congregate around lodging, whether it's pretty much a nice 4-star hotel lodge experience like in the valley at Yosemite, on down to like the tent city at Yosemite, on down to the front country campgrounds at Yosemite, on down to the wilderness and backcountry, the high country outside of the valley campsites way off from any roads or anything at Yosemite. What proportion of people are going to be taking up each of those? Okay. So, anybody know? For your park, maybe you saw any sense of it's hard or easy to get a campsite, it's hard or easy to get a lodge, like a hotel style room in your park. Anybody? Lodges. 100%? All right. No backcountry camping at all? Or just not super widespread?
I think it's allowed, but it's not super
Okay. Fair.
widespread.
Which makes sense.
Because right next to the port's all the gift shop, visitor center.
Yeah.
I'm sure they got lodges and all that.
Yeah, and you can like pay somebody a couple of bucks to like braid your hair in cornrows. Super popular on cruises. All right. Anybody else? Mostly lodges, mostly campsites. Exclusively one end of that scale or the other. C&O Canal National Historic Park is a difficult one. It doesn't have any lodges. It's super skinny. It's like a couple hundred yards wide in most places. It has a ton of bed and breakfasts along the way. But that's cheating. That's not a lot. No, I'm kidding. No, that's valid. That's valid, right? So, a very popular. Have you guys seen anything about the bicyclists on the C&O Canal National Historic Path? The bicyclists, the people on, as they used to say, the turn of the century, velocipedes. Yeah. So it's a nice, super flat, because a canal needs to be basically level, so the water doesn't all like slosh down to one end. It's got to be super flat. The canal path has to accommodate like livestock, horses, oxen, to pull the barges back in the late 17 and early 1800s and so forth. That's pretty sweet for bicycling. In the same way that, we take a lot of old railroad lines in the United States because we want people in cars if you're a car manufacturer. We take a bunch of that land that was graded and bladed, super smooth and flat, turn it into a rails to trails program, and people ride those for days with a Z, right? Super fun biking trips. And you don't have to have a fully self-supported bike packing trip with a trailer and panniers or saddlebags. Whip out that credit card and you go from bed and breakfast to bed and breakfast. Like, that's pretty sweet. You know, if you're at the other end of the crazy scale on biking, you're gonna go ragbri for like several days and just ride and ride and ride. Or if you're a Trans-America Trail person, you're gonna ride through Carbondale self-supported. But C&O Canal National Historic Park, it doesn't have huge interior wilderness areas, and it's not supposed to. It's protecting that canal feature, and so most of the lodging, the residence, is gonna be, well, nearby, easily accessible businesses that aren't run by the Park Service at all. Just people seeing a business opportunity, a service opportunity, and making a living doing that. Okay? And people come to you. They give you money. You make them breakfast. They leave. It's not a bad life, you know? So it makes sense. All right. Anybody else? What's your, for Isle Royal, what's your breakdown on lodges? Are there lodges on the island? Or is it all like backcountry campsites? Are there shelters on the island? Are there campsites that you have to make yourself and you're not allowed to use shelters, or got to use tent pads in some fragile areas? What's it like at Isle Royal?
63 campgrounds, about 2 or 3 lodges, and backcountry off the trail.
Yeah. So you get off of the 6-hour former Coast Guard cutter ferry ride at Isle Royal, having crossed Lake Superior, one of the deepest, coldest, darkest, stormiest freshwater bodies on the planet. It's pretty sweet. And you get off at the dock, and they use their big old crane, the largest machine in use by the National Park Service, to crane dumpsters off and on to cycle out the trash on site. And you can walk 150 yards from the dock to one of the lodges. You can walk 10 yards into like the tiny little gift shop and visitor center on the island, where you can walk several hundred yards to any of the cabins and open-sided shelters, or you could walk any of the other miles across the entire island throughout their wilderness trail network and camp in designated spots to prevent those sites from getting too big. Okay? So, it's a wilderness area, but it's got lodges on the edge. It's a wilderness area, but it's got a tiny little gift shop with super overpriced Pop-Tarts right on the edge of the dock. And they do all of their ranger-based, like, visitor contact stuff right there, because all the rest of it's got to be backcountry, low contact, low use density kind of stuff. So when we were there last time for summer camp in 2012, they had a telescope set up and some spotting scopes set up for solar stuff. We were looking at sunspots or a partial eclipse or something like that. And it was really cool. And it was all nicely curated and super friendly and easy, and like nice curated gravel paths and a little amphitheater with like the louvered lights and stuff to prevent light pollution for evening interp programs outside of the lodge. And then anything past that, and you're into like the primeval northern forest on this island. Okay? So the terrain, the topography, those resources, they're going to determine where your roads are, or any roads at all. They're going to determine how tightly is this stuff clustered together. Do we have to drive through the park for a couple hours, like at Canyonlands, to get to some of these places? Drive for a couple of hours in some of these bigger parks to get to some of the visitor centers and so forth? Or is it all right there at the one entrance, and then everything sort of slowly trickles through past that point via shuttle buses that you control, where people in their own vehicles? It makes a huge difference in terms of the number of wildlife collisions, the kind of experience that people have and what they remember, the amount of contact time that they have with Park Service staff like you, or concessioners working with the Park Service to drive those buses and basically act as tour guides and teach people a lot during those short hops from stop to stop on those bus rides. Right? You have good control over these things this semester in terms of the park infrastructure and resources. This is a lot of where the maintenance, the restoration, the careful planning, and the adjustment happens. The mid-course corrections happen if something has gone wrong, or if a species is getting impacted in a negative way, or visitors are beating a place to death. You've got control over their travel to the place that's getting beaten to death. Okay? So, Sometimes the valid answer is going to be, let's expand and improve and make easier, more accessible the trail network. Sometimes it's to close off access, or shrink or grow the parking lot, or shrink or grow the advertisements, the information and the messaging that gets people to those parking lots. A lot of parks have the obvious answers to people's basic reasons for being there right in front of them. And then there's this whole other, mostly secret, it's not classified or anything, it's not hidden from the public really actively, but there's a whole other set of trailheads and campgrounds, campsites, and experiences and wildlife encounters and so forth that people would be super excited about, and your staff doesn't tell folks about them. Why do you think that is? So,
Preserve it.
sorry?
To preserve it. And like having too much traffic.
Yeah. Preservation is a big underlying piece of it. So Acadia National Park is shaped like a big horseshoe, opening downward. And there's the busy side of it and the not so busy side. All of the super easy to access, right in your face, big signs. It's on every pamphlet recommending where to go when you visit Acadia National Park. All connected by the Ocean Drive Loop Road. So Thunder Hole and Sand Beach and Cadillac Mountain and Otter Cliffs and so forth. All connected by that loop road. It's a one-way loop road. There are some parking lots at each one of those stops and so forth. The entire other half of the island also has parking lots and trailheads and so forth. And it's just as good. And none of that stuff shows up on most of the pamphlets. It's all on the map. But when you ask a ranger, hey, what should I do? Where should we go today? They'll tell you, well, visit Cadillac Mountain, visit Thunder Hole and Sand Beach, not in that order because it's a one-way road, and so forth. And they might, if you kind of press them and say, well, you know, we kind of want to get away from everybody else, they'll say, oh, okay, well, you want to go over to Acadia Mountain. And there's never any competition for parking spots over there. And most of the time, you're not going to encounter anybody else. And some of those parking lots are just as easy to get to as the stuff on the busy side. So there's an information asymmetry. You know a lot as the park ranger, and you've got access to, your visitors have access to, on paper, all of the facilities, all the territory you're working so hard to manage, but also to protect and preserve. So, one valid answer for our scenarios later this semester is going to be, well, we're going to publicize this particular place because it's hardened against impacts. We can modify visitor use in a constructive and agreeable way to people at some of these places. We'll kind of develop it a little bit. We'll pave more of those miles of paths. We'll have handrails along more of those miles of paths. We'll make it easier slopes on more of those miles of paths. And for the folks who know that they want something else, they're a lot more likely to be able to take care of themselves on a less well-developed path, less intensively developed path. Okay? So, keeping in mind your park's trails and campsites and so forth layout, is there a busy half to your park like at Acadia and a quiet half to your park? Or is it pretty much no, everybody goes everywhere in my park and that's how we like it. And that's evidenced by heavy-duty resource hardening and protection at kind of all of our sites. Or is it mostly well, the only people even showing up at our park are ones who kind of want to know a little bit more, kind of want to go a little bit more into it, go a little harder, so to speak. What is your park on that spectrum? Is it pretty much all as it says on the label? Or is there busy side, publicized side versus a quiet side? Or is it kind of a sleeper hit, so to speak? You don't really advertise much of any of the amenities of your park, as evidenced by its layout and so forth, because you don't need to. So let's hear from these groups. Take a look at your map if you're not real sure how to answer this question. This is a pretty big synthesis question, getting at the Park Service's strategy in your park based on the layout and types, the hardening, the ready for lots of visitors character of your recreation infrastructure and facilities resources. The answer is definitely not going to be the same across all of our parks, so we'll spend a couple of minutes looking into this one for sure. So the map can give you some valuable hints on answering this question for your park. The things to do or plan your trip section of the National Park Service website for your park specifically will give you a lot of real clear hints on answering this question. Like at Acadia National Park, there's a long list of stuff to do, and all of the stuff at the top is all on the same side of the island, on the busy side, all served by Loop Road. What this frees you up to do as a wildlife ranger, a resource ranger, so like habitat, ecosystem, forestry type discipline, a visitor and recreation oriented ranger, a law enforcement ranger, knowing the specific allocation of your park across advertised, front country, accessible, popular, showy, versus the kind of stuff that we don't generally tell most visitors unless they specifically pointedly ask about it. That helps you do a lot more management on a more site-specific and appropriate level instead of a sort of a naive one-size-fits-all set of solutions across your entire park. Okay? So at Grand Teton National Park, there's basically one road that runs north-south along the entire spine of Grand Teton, connecting all of the easy-to-access stuff. And that's the one road that everybody has to use to get from one place to the next, to connect different parts of their experience together. And so everything along that road, including their gorgeous visitor center, huge, it's all ready for that. The entire administration complex is right off of that road behind some trees, so you're not looking at it. You're looking at the mountains beyond it. And there's a bazillion other things to do at Grand Teton, but unless you're really looking for it, as a visitor, you're going to fly right by all that stuff because there aren't the huge pull-offs and parking lots and intentional interpretation and conversations had at the visitor center when you're talking with the rangers there. Aiming you at those things. All right, so anybody got a sense of, we got a busy side and a quiet side? What is it like for your park? How about it?
So we noticed like in the Olympic, it's they have like the paved road like around the park, and on the inside there's not really much like paved road or amenities or lodges. Those are all kind of on the outskirts, and they're kind of heavily populated on like the north end.
Okay.
And then they also like to advertise a lot of like the coastal area on the website and like the temperate rainforest part.
Okay. So most folks are going to be coming at it from the north, sounds like, which makes sense given its geographic position relative to major towns or cities. And a lot of the easy to access stuff is pretty quick to access out at the edge. Okay. I think Isle Royale is very similar in that regard. So there's not really a lot of roads on Isle Royale at all, but everything is sort of clustered around that dock because the one ferry that serves it, and then a super, super low use section that's served by float plane elsewhere. Okay. What's it like for Sino Canal National Historic Park? Are there a couple of spots that everybody goes to, and it's like, when I go to the NPS website, they're going to probably send me there? Great Falls Tavern, yeah. All right. Cool. I bet there's a bunch of rapids. Nice. And spend all of your money, because that's real close to Potomac, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the United States. Right behind Marin Valley, California. Or County, California. All right. Sino Canal National Historic Park. We're going to have a bunch of the most accessible and best restored and most curated like historic spots, a couple of the buildings, a couple of the locks and dams real close to Great Falls Tavern. It also happens to be where some of the most exciting and huge whitewater hydraulics are. So you can watch rafters and kayakers going down, taking their life into their own hands with that nasty water. There's a bunch of rock climbing in that section of the gorge right there, the 80-foot walls. There's a bajillion rock climbing routes, mostly single pitch. Okay. And then all the rest of it, pretty sort of like off in the distance, and they don't really spend a bunch of effort telling people about that part? Or... Okay. Yeah, right on. Sorry, the boat rides are not offered this year, or?
No, they're all free this year.
All free this year. Cool. All right. Also, and this is a total like flex on everybody else move, but the Coast Guard will run their patrol helicopters through the gorge, like at gorge level. And it is like ear-shatteringly loud, and they're doing it because they can. It hurt my ears a lot for a whole summer, and I'm still salty about it apparently. So they got that going for them. All right. Where else? Whom haven't we heard from yet on spatial allocation of rec infrastructure? Okay.
We're doing the Teddy Roosevelt Park, like that's like right under the trail and it's kind of like adjacent to it.
Okay. One section of the trail, not like along the whole trail, like the whole trail.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, it just kind of goes around the park, and then there's like a north unit, a south unit, and then there's like a little unit that's like where like he actually had a ranch. So that one's more like a cultural center, and then the other one's like hiking and scenic.
Yeah. Okay. So for Roosevelt, is that a National Historic Site? Oh, okay. So for Roosevelt, there's a historic ranch section and more natural sections for camping and hiking. All right, cool. Anybody else? Virgin Islands? Anybody else? Are you guys like everywhere is front country and accessible, or we've got a busy side, quiet side thing, or is it all just like more kind of remote and you really got to ask to figure out where to go?
I think we got odor of one of the water planes.
Yeah.
And then
Totally consistent with ferry access, yeah.
everything's located at the front of the bays. And then trails in the back country are like on a topo map, are real hilly and steep. So probably not a lot of people congregate up there.
All right.
Got a couple secret beaches, like
Secret beaches?
it's called Honeymoon Beach.
Secret beaches? That's not fair.
There's a restaurant that's only for campers, but the locals have discovered it and it's supposed to be like amazing. So then they go to the campers restaurant, campsite restaurant or whatever, and there's some like floating bar called Billy T's that everyone's like
Okay.
floating taco bar.
So our example from earlier on spatial allocation, like where are we sticking our effort on having access to lots of high quality front country infrastructure versus kind of letting it be natural and quiet and chill on another section. Acadia National Park, even on the Ocean Drive Loop Road, there's one sand beach, and it's like the largest only like white sand looking beach on that section of coast for a real long distance. That part of northern New England, the coast of the Atlantic, is mostly basalt, so it's like real blocky cliffs instead of sand beaches that we'd expect like down in Florida. So the sand beach at Acadia is super popular because it's like, this is the one beach, let's go. And then the water's like 43 degrees, so everybody dips a toe in and goes, nope, forget it. We'll just sunbathe for a while. And all of the other beaches at Acadia National Park and along most of the rest of the coastline are actually cobble beaches. Has anybody ever been to a cobble beach before? Like stones rolled smooth by the ocean, mostly granite, which is not naturally a smooth cleaving mineral. The size of anywhere from like pea gravel up to grapefruit and larger. Cobble beaches. What's a cobble beach like?
I went to one, it was in, I can't remember where exactly, but I was in Greece. And so it was a bunch of like different minerals and rocks, all different colors and shapes and sizes. But they were all really smoothed out. And there was like different structures underwater and near the front of the water.
Okay. Pretty amazing. All right, so cobble beaches are awesome. They're different than what you expect. So when a visitor to Acadia National Park shows up looking at a beach like that, for those of you listening at home, we've got a picture from Greece showing a cobble beach of multicolored minerals. Each sort of cobble's a different bright color and so forth. When you go to a cobble beach expecting a sand beach, it looks really different. It sounds really different because the wave action is what's making those cobbles round and so forth. If you've ever played billiards or pool, every time a wave hits, it's knocking a bunch of those together. That's how it's doing the tumbling action. And it sounds like somebody's just, broken the pool game and knocked all those billiard balls apart. It's a strange rocks slamming against each other kind of sound over and over. And as the wave rolls in on different sections of the beach, you hear it go clack, 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 like down the beach. It's really cool. It's really cool. And Acadia National Park has at least a dozen of these. And some of them, well, a couple of them, they have a small parking lot with a small sign posted out the parking lot. And they mark a few of them on the map. And all the rest of them, they don't even let you know it's there. And because these are basalt cliffs, you can't see from the top of the cliff down through the vegetation to see the cobble beach down at the bottom, and you can't hear the waves, racking those pool ball cobbles continuously 24/7. It's amazing. But they're secret beaches. And you're totally allowed to go to any of them. When we go up there for summer camp, we go cross country on some visitor created trails that the Park Service is not real excited exist. But it's allowed because that's how you access the cobble beaches on the south side of the quiet side of the island. And they're amazing. And we stretch out, and if you guys want, I'll send you some videos of what that looks like. They're incredible. They're also super romantic. Like, they're secluded. It's this weird, gorgeous, multicolored alien landscape, and you got that entire beach all to yourself. And it's sand beach, 2 million visitors a year. Right down the road, or right down the coastline. Same island, just slightly different direction that happens to catch sand off of those waves instead of cobbles off the cliffs. Okay? And so the Park Service provides a different kind of experience to those cobble beaches by not advertising that, by not making it super easy and obvious to get to. And so you kind of got to be a local, or an employee, or a researcher who gets nice tours from employees, fellow park ranger folks, to even know about that stuff. To know about the questions to ask, like, hey, how do I access Little Hunter's Beach? It's tiny, and you are almost guaranteed to be the only person there, even in the middle of peak season on, like, Memorial Day weekend, because it's right there on Ocean Drive Loop Road. But that section of road, it's like you can park a car there, and you're driving around a tight corner, and you might have time to even recognize that there is a parking spot there and a tiny little trail that's like this wide before you're whipping around the corner onto the next part of the island. They're hiding this stuff in plain sight. So this is how a lot of the archaeological resources, the petroglyphs, burial sites, cellar holes, granaries, which look a lot like cellar holes, and so forth, they might be right off of a trail, but if they don't tell you that it's there, you don't know, and you just keep walking right on by. And so do the other 1,999,999 other visitors that year. Makes sense? Cool. So one valid response for certain of these scenarios this semester is going to be, yeah, we have this resource, and it's amazing, and everybody who does go there is going to have a super high quality experience. We're going to check our 1916 OG mission box of preserve resources by not telling people that many of them are there, even though everybody would really enjoy going to them. At Acadia National Park, the reason that they don't advertise these incredibly beautiful, scenic, romantic, secluded, and many of them available cobble beaches is that that resource is desirable for theft. So that picture that Rebecca showed us of those cobbles, those gorgeous, brightly colored, naturally tumbled stones, well, if everybody takes one of those, it's not going to be that many years before literally the entire beach has been physically excavated by folks removing stones, one person at a time, one cobble at a time. And places like Dinosaur or Petrified Forest, also, national park units, they have archival photos taken of the same spot, same view, same direction, same focal length, and so forth, or field of view, just throughout time. And you can see just that entire area that used to be strewn with just jumbles of petrified logs or dinosaur bones or what have you, just going away year after year, decade after decade, from visitors, our forebears, going and not going to the gift shop for a memento of the trip, but taking the thing, and now nobody else ever gets to enjoy it. So, yeah, we absolutely hide some of this stuff in plain sight. When we were at Newspaper Rock on summer camp, we saw a couple of legit OG petroglyphs graffitied and carved over by people since about 1800, settlers to the area. And the Park Service and the state Natural Areas program let us drive by hundreds and hundreds of other petroglyph sites on our way into Canyonlands. hiding it in plain sight. Because if they put up a fence around each of those, now you got something interesting back there. Let's go see what that is. And bolt cutters aren't that expensive. Neither are gas-powered rock saws. We could just drag over to one of those things and have our own little petroglyph. That'd make it a trip to remember. So, that's the thing. People have actually done that. And so, the protection of those resources is actively passive, if that makes sense. We're hiding them by not putting any resources into getting people there. Keeping those GIS layers of all the GPS petroglyphs off of the internet for as long as we can, and so forth. Make sense? All right, any questions about infrastructure and its distribution, or the trade-offs that we're making consciously to protect resources, but also to provide access to resources for high-quality recreation opportunities? Every park has its version of Little Hunter's Beach, a cobble beach that is gorgeous and secluded, and you kind of got to know about it before you know about it in order to go visit. So, ask yourself, what might that be at my park? And think for a minute on how you might find information about that via the internet for this semester. Because we're talking about, the Park Service legit, on purpose, does not mention these things. For good reasons. So how do we this semester find access to those things or information about those things? All right, cool. One recent problem with recreation infrastructure relative to the internet and in particular social media is sort of the herpes of social media, that is influencers doing things for clout in protected natural areas. Like out west, has anybody ever seen an Instagram photo of some absurdly white tooth smiled person like laying in a field of wildflowers? That's a thing. And it happens to the point on flower farms and in protected natural areas that have lots of wildflowers, especially on super bloom years like we had a couple years ago. In the desert, where like one after the other, folks will get that photo and post it to social media and just destroy that space. And so if this section right here in front of me, right at the edge of the road where we've pulled off, is trampled and those flowers are just destroyed and kind of ratty looking, go 2 strides farther and crop that part out and go make a snow angel in the flowers, get our photo or a video or whatever, and then pack up, upload it with our 4 or 5G microchips we got injected, and on to our next thing. And then the next person after you comes in, and they go 4 steps in, and then 6 and 8, and so on and so forth. So this was never much of a thing until now. So there's a place called Horseshoe Bend on the upper Colorado River, just upstream of the Grand Canyon. Beautiful spot. It's one of the curviest sections of river on the earth, right behind the Horseshoe Bend on the Mississippi that we visit on summer camp with Schoonover and Williard. Like, more degrees of curvature in fewer river meters or miles than pretty much anywhere else on the face of the planet. And Horseshoe Bend is until about 15 years ago, was just kind of a wide dirt, it's not even gravel, parking lot on the side of the highway going to a place called Page, right next to Glen Canyon Dam on the upper Colorado. And if you live close to there, or you happen to have a friend who is super into whitewater rafting, you might have heard about Horseshoe Bend, or maybe seen like a postcard quality photo on National Geographic, or in National Geographic, or at a visitor center nearby, something like that. There are no signs, no trails, no parking lots, no bathrooms, or any of that stuff. It was just like a spot for a car to pull off, and maybe like a 1/4 of a mile hike, kind of over a short ridge, and then down the plateau to the lip of this upper part of the Grand Canyon in this gorgeous, gorgeous spot. I'll pull up a photo of it here in a sec so you can see. And then social media happened. And it went from a couple of thousand visitors a year to several million visitors a year. And people dying a lot by falling off trying to take selfies. Backing up. So last time we were there in 2018 for summer camp, we arrived there kind of third week of May, and several people had already died that year from just getting too close to the edge and falling off. There's no fences, it's not run by the Park Service or anybody, it's just like open rangeland out west, as they do. And after it ballooned by a factor of over 2,000 from a couple thousand visitors a year total, so maybe a couple a day on average, if you want to think of it that way, to thousands of people there at one time, with millions of visitors a year now. Now they're building it as fast as they can. They have been for the last couple of years. Just like a stack of bathrooms, like dozens of them, and a huge parking lot, and an entrance fee, and entrance stations, and this paved path with fencing on it, and a bunch of interpretive signs and stuff like that. And it's kind of expensive, all because of social media. Like, the state government and tribal sort of partnership that's managing that spot, they're not doing this because they want to. Like, nobody goes into park and wildland management to work an entrance booth. Like, it's not a super exciting job, but you gotta do it. Like, we gotta pay for the fences that keep idiots from taking that last real quick step down to the river. Because cell phone cameras suck. Like, they're wide angle lenses, so you get the weird duck lip selfie and then somebody falls off. And without somebody there to say, hey, let's tap the brakes on this. You know, people have died here just recently. We just finished scraping the last person's remains off the rocks at the bottom. Please don't get right up to the edge. People are going to do it. So, unfortunately, for the small minority of people not capable of keeping themselves safe on a cliff, we gotta amp up. We gotta pave the parking lot, build 24 toilets and an entrance station, and so on and so forth, and charge $100 a vehicle to get in. So that's modern life, I guess. But here's an image or a video of Horseshoe Bend. Let's find it here. If you got your phone, you can look it up too. It is near Page, Arizona, if you are looking for that. Now, remember, in these short video clips, it was, and in these photos, it used to be a place that might get a couple of people a day. Now it gets a couple of million per year. So we get conditions and crowding that look like this. This is an amazing spot for the sunset. So your photo, if it's a beautiful, like, postcard quality photo, probably was taken at power hour, that last hour before and after sunset. That's what the use level looks like. Let's see. Here's a longer distance shot. People hit the cliff edge and then they spread out in both directions, scrambling over loose rocks right at the edge. The cliff here is just shy of 1,000 feet high, I believe.
It's the same girl, like, sitting on the edge. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Oh my God.
And so there becomes this thing where everybody is trying to get the same photo of like looking cool with the right angle. You know, for social media, you gotta have angles, apparently. I don't know how duck lips interface with angles, but this is the world we live in now. And so you get this thing where everybody crawls out right to the edge, and then they sit, you know, like looking out over the horseshoe bend with the sun low in the sky. You get the lens flare effect. It's super cool looking. And there's like, the photos are all so carefully framed, except for mine where I'm taking pictures of people taking pictures because I'm weird like that. And this is my job. You get like the person and the sun and horseshoe bend and these beautiful orange red rocks, like the Vermilion Cliffs as they're called, right there. And you don't see the other 2,000 people right there, like right there. So you get lines forming to stand or sit at the edge of the cliff, take your photo, go, man, this is super epic. And then you get out of the way for the next person. Because the demand for that experience is so high, you end up not getting that experience, but in like 15 to 30 second chunks, so you can get that vine. They don't do vines anymore, I don't know. Short YouTube clips, whatever. TikTok, thank you. TikTok is a stain on human existence. And then you get out of the way because the next person's been waiting almost as long as you have to do the exact same thing. And even sometimes make the same joke. Like, yeah. You see the weddings out there very commonly. It's a super scenic spot. And it's funny because you'll see people in, you know, beautiful, like multi-$1,000 wedding dresses, however much people pay for this. And they're like flumping along across this red rock sand trying to not get like bright red dust all over their stuff. And they take their wedding photos, do the ceremony or whatever, right at sunset or that sort of thing. And there's 2,000 people like all around, and you're trying to have like this super serious moment. Like, I swear to you, I will never leave you. Like, you are so important to me. You are the Bonnie to my Clyde. And like somebody else is like doing duck lip things like 30 feet away, you know? Or like somebody's kid like slips their like hyperactive child leash and like runs through the ceremony. Like, this is what happens. This is what happens when we have high demand in a dangerous place for a limited scenic resource, right? It's just a weird spot on the surface of the earth in terms of its shape and color. It doesn't look like a strip mall. And so everybody's got to get their photo there or have their wedding there and so forth. And everybody's jammed on top of everybody else. So this is the kind of thing that was happening at each of our parks this semester before the Park Service jumped in and tried to get anything better going than that. All right? Cool. So we're going to use Horseshoe Bend as kind of an anti-type, or a dark pattern, as it's called in other fields. So a dark pattern is what not to do. A good design pattern is, this works for these reasons, in this kind of a context, and under these circumstances. See if that might work for your park. Horseshoe Bend, as it is kind of the opposite of that. Like, learn from this fails so you don't have this kind of a situation at your park. If your park has cliffs, if your park has any kind of a prominence like a peak or a ridgeline that opens or looks out across the west, we're going to be doing some sunset management. If it looks out east, we're going to be doing some sunrise management. So sunrises at Acadia National Park, looking out over the Atlantic, super popular. Hundreds and hundreds of people will drive up an entire mountain to all watch the sunrise over the Atlantic and then pop over the clouds, which our little mountain peak is over. It's a gorgeous spot. It's awesome. And they'll also watch the sun go down the other side of the mountain at sunset. So the demand for this place is like 3:30 to about 7 a.m. super high. And everybody goes home and has breakfast. And then folks will come back up to the top of the mountain to hike around and enjoy the mountain. And then they'll go down for dinner and then come back up for dinner. So it's like this place is boom, bust in terms of crowding and demand and people, hitting each other's cars in the parking lot and, people's family dogs shooting out of the car door to go take a dump or a whiz on our beautiful national park and like getting hit by a Greyhound bus going through there. And it's chaos and anarchy. I mean, it's wild unless you understand these dynamics for your park. What's the demand going to be at sunrise or sunset? It's probably going to be very tightly tied to specific few scenic spots. And everywhere else is going to be fine at sunrise and sunset. Okay? So, your infrastructure has a lot to do with the problems you're averting, like at Horseshoe Bend, and the problems you are mitigating, like at Acadia on the summit of Cadillac Mountain, looking east for sunrise, west for sunset, and the problems that you are avoiding entirely by paving a 1/3 mile loop trail at the top of Cadillac Mountain for folks who want to walk around that very ecologically fragile mountain summit. Extremely fragile. And there are thousands of them a day. 5,000 or 6,000 on a typical peak season summer day. The soil can handle one or a couple of step passes. So we gotta pave it, all right? Your infrastructure has everything to do with saving the world, okay? Any questions about infrastructure? Anything you're not real sure about at your park that we can kind of pick apart with you? All right. How are we doing on time? 3:30. Cool. Next up, we're going to switch over to air resources. So air sheds, air quality, nighttime sky and light pollution. Can you see the stars? Can you see the Milky Way? Can you see the Milky Way so hard you can see the colors in the Milky Way and it's not just milky? Can you see the northern lights or southern lights? Is the light pollution low enough that your light sensitive and migratory species in particular are able to function in your park? Or is this a problem? Is your park trumpeting the fact that you are an international dark sky reserve, as they are called? A program that was co-launched by the U.S. National Park Service to provide wildlife some dark places to live versus the other 90% of the surface of the planet that we've colonized and taken over and light polluted, and so forth. We'll also talk a lot about soundscape and what that looks like at your park. Cool? Cool. That's Monday's work though. So let's end a little bit early today. I'll hang around for questions. If you guys have any questions or things that you're not real sure about with any of our content areas so far at your park, this afternoon right now, as we are packing up, is a perfect chance to pick my brain on it, see if there's anything I know about it that you haven't found yet, that you will soon find. Otherwise, we'll see you on Monday. Don't forget, extra credit opportunity at the Becker Pavilion for the outdoorsy film coming up. Yes. Email me with a super brief report. Doesn't have to be a long write-up or anything.
We figured we should probably just talk to you about like switching cars.
Okay. Let me stop all this recording stuff.